Hello and welcome to the next and final instalment in the motorcycle and discussion of electric vehicles series of videos. In this one I'm going to talk about some electric vehicles in a bit more detail and make some general observations about the particular models. Keep in mind, first of all, I don't own and have never driven an electric vehicle, and I don't work for any motor vehicle company, so I'm not here necessarily to recommend any particular brand or model of that brand, just to give you some background information that might help you to make a decision if you are in the market for an electric vehicle. I'm old enough to remember the time when Japanese vehicles first started coming onto the Australian market, and initially people wouldn't buy them because made in Japan was synonymous with cheap, shoddy workmanship, things that were poor quality. Progressively the Japanese learned how to build their cars better, and they're now the cars we buy in enormous numbers. Toyotas, Mazda for example. In the 90s and early 2000s, Korean cars began to appear on the Australian market, and again we would not buy them because Korean cars were cheap and they were synonymous with shoddy workmanship and poor quality and so on. The Koreans have also learned how to build a quality car and how to match the Japanese in terms of after-sales service and customer experience and all those sorts of things. And the Korean cars, after Toyota and Mazda, the next two biggest selling cars are Hyundai and Kia, which both essentially are the same company. So the cars that we buy now are predominantly from Asian manufacturers. Whether they're made in Korea or Japan is another matter. Some are made in Thailand, some are made in South Africa, and some are made in Poland. But that's not the point. The point is that the Japanese makers initially devastated the market for Australian-made cars, being Holden, Ford and Chrysler. They did the same to the American market, and they did the same to the British market. And although in the case of the British market there were some other factors, the Korean makers have come along and haven't done exactly the same thing, not quite, but they're certainly on their way to doing it. Now all of this is leading me to the point of saying that the Chinese manufacturers are now on the way to doing the same thing. And as far as I can determine, there are three major Chinese manufacturers of motor vehicles, leaving out Tesla, which is an American company that makes cars in China. There are three Chinese companies that make cars. They are GWN, which is Great Wall Motors, which you probably know from their utes, but they also own an electric brand called Aura. There is SAIC, which I think stands for Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, and it owns a number of brands including LDV and MG. And then there is BYD, which means build your own dreams apparently, or build your dreams, and they own the BYD brand. Initially they were a battery manufacturer, but of late they've decided to start making cars as well. Now each of those three cars are featured in the images at the end of this video in order of the MG Excite, MG4 Excite, the BYD Atto 3, the Aura, which is in some markets known as the Aura Funky Cat, the Aura Good Cat, and the Aura, I think it's Sport, is the final one. The Sport's not necessarily confirmed for the Australian market yet, but the other three are already here in the Australian market. Now the MG, for example, is marketed in a particular way. The MG Excite 51, and the 51 stands for the 51 kilowatt hour battery, is about $39,000 drive away. So it is marketed, as I said in the last video, as an alternative to, say, the Toyota Corolla. And if you were thinking of buying a second car for your family to do the daily run around, and drive down to the railway station perhaps, or take the kids to school, do the shopping, go to the gym, all of those things that people do on a day-to-day basis to clock up that 33 kilometres we do each day, then the Excite 51 is the ideal car for you. It has a claimed WLTP range of about 330 kilometres. Therefore you could do almost a whole week and more without needing to charge it up. And if you plug it into a power point at your home on a Friday night, then Saturday morning when you went out to start the sports run or whatever else is that you do of a Saturday morning, the car would be fully charged, ready to do another run. The $38,990 or 30. I think it's $38,990 is the price point. There is the drive-away price, and that is the appeal of that vehicle in terms of saying, well, you could buy a Toyota Corolla or something like that, but this one, fully electric, you'll never have to go to the petrol station again. The the long range version of that vehicle is about 51,000, but in between there is the BYD Atto 3, which I think is around 40,000, 44,000, something like that, drive away. It's got a slightly bigger battery and longer range and so on, and it's an SUV, but it would be marketed along the lines of the same thing. You could do the weekly run around and only have to charge it up on a Friday night, plug it in on Friday night, and be ready to do the rest of the week. Do another week without needing to recharge. But you could also do a weekend road trip somewhere, or if you were going on holidays, you could do it. It has much more space than the MG Excite, and I believe has a more powerful engine and so on. And I actually saw one in Holbrook, which is about 3 hours drive from Goulburn recently. A bloke stopping there to recharge his vehicle. I don't know where he'd come from and how long he'd been on the road for and where he was going. But I know he was obviously on a road trip somewhere, because you don't just drive to Holbrook, especially when I saw him, which was late in the afternoon. The other brand is Aura, and the Aura Funky Cat, I think it's called in the United Kingdom, and I think in other markets it's called the Good Cat, is the smallest of those three. It's apparently a joint project between Great Wall Motors and BMW, and you can see some mini stylings about the headlights and some other parts of the vehicle. It's a urban SUV, if you like. In other words, it's a car that's designed primarily to be driving around the city. It doesn't have very much boot space, and if you're going to do the grocery shopping, for example, you'd have to take only one person with you and put down the back seats in order to fit the weekly groceries in there. But it is also relatively cheap, I think 40,000 or thereabouts, and so presents as a realistic alternative as the second car for your runabout during the week, do the grocery shopping, that sort of thing. You could take a weekend trip in it, but you would be needing to stop and recharge on a regular basis. The Aura Sports, which apparently takes some of its stylings from the Porsche Taycan, according to the experts who know more about cars and car design than I do, it's going to have a longer range, but it's also going to be much more expensive, in the 50,000 or more drive-away price bracket. You'll find lots and lots of reviews on YouTube of all of those vehicles that I've mentioned by people who know much more about reviewing cars than I do, and have driven all sorts of cars, electric and liquid fuel cars, and know the sorts of things that they should report on and report about the various infotainment screens on in vehicles and so on. So there is just a bit of a taste of the sorts of vehicles you can find. I hope you've enjoyed it and found this series informative. Enjoy the scenery for the rest of this ride, and I will talk to you when I'm making another video in the near future.